Welcome everybody from all around the world and happy Earth Day. And we hope that everyone will be inspired today to participate in rethinking the home of tomorrow.
As Susan mentioned, I run an innovation lab, a government innovation lab in Boston City Hall, called the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics. And I was hoping that it would make sense to just share a little bit about how we think about innovation and collaboration, because obviously people like Kent Larson and his team, they do, the rocket ship kind of stuff, but it's our job to figure out how do we make use of that in our city. So can we move on next? So this is how we think about innovation, generally speaking, in our city. So our analysis of creativity and innovation in local government is that governments are often expected just to make the right decision, right? There's a lot of things that need fixing in the world, and oftentimes government is just pointed at and says, and people will say to us, you have to fix it. You have to put the right policy in place or the right program, what have you. And that's not possible, right? I mean, we can make educated guesses and we can do our best to make the right selections, obviously. But in a real way, we need the ability to experiment, to understand what will work in our city. And that was the founding principle of New Urban Mechanics, to be the experimentalists in local government. So we're a team that work out of the mayor's office, and essentially our job is to try things, to explore the realm of what could work, what could possibly work in our city. And this model here, this three-stage model, explore, experiment, and evaluate, sort of typifies the way that we think about the work that we do. So as we explore, what we're doing is we're trying to understand our communities in deep ways, right? So we're talking to everyday citizens or residents. We're talking to startups and social entrepreneurs and to people like Kent. And when we talk to all these people, what we're trying to do is look for ideas that we think would work to make life better in our city. Just like the commissioner, we also take a very human-centered approach or community-centered approach to looking at innovation in our city. And as we go through, as we talk to all these different people, the intent is to get to a series of experiments that we can run in our city to see if they will indeed work. Because just because there's a good idea doesn't mean that people will automatically accept it. Sometimes we have to test it and see, and that's really that middle section there, that we have to, our job is to do those experiments and to work with the community to understand if it didn't work, why didn't it work? And as we start running these experiments everywhere in the city, we start generating data and insight about how these things are working or not working, right? Because one of the challenges for local government, as I'm sure you're very familiar with, Mayor, innovation requires risk, right? You have to be willing. There needs to be some capacity for accepting and dealing with risk in order to roll out innovations. And so, rather than expecting everybody in local government to be taking risk, which I think would not be a good idea, instead it's our job in New York Mechanics to be the risk takers. And so that, when one of these different units in government want to explore new territory, they can reach out to us and we can help them set up these experiments and so on. And that's really what we do. And the last phase there, as I say, evaluate, is to assess those experiments. Did they work? Did they not work? And if they don't work, we should shut them down. But if they do work, how do we scale them? How do we think about the impacts to the budget and to training and operations, and how will the unions respond to these new ideas and so on? So that's basically how we think about these things. Next slide. And so this is an example. So what I wanted to do is to give you an example of how this has played out in our work over the years. So this is a feature of Boston, right? Potholes. I don't know if there are potholes in Taipei, New Taipei City. I didn't see any when I was there, but okay, fair enough. But this is what the roads look like in Boston after a hard winter, after we've gone through several months of freezing and thawing. all of the freezing and thawing and all of the salt on the roads has an impact, and we end up with these potholes. And so this is one of the most commonly stated complaints that our residents have about Boston is that, you know, they see a pothole on their street and they want us to come and fix it. And years ago, when we were looking at these things, and obviously we do everything we can to fix them as quickly and as effectively as we can, but we began to think about them. When you think about the idea of people picking up phones and asking us to fix things, that's a pretty profound moment of civic engagement, right? Because we're getting thousands of people calling us asking for help. That it suggests to us that just treating that as a complaint is probably not a good idea. We should be looking at this as a bigger opportunity to build trust. You know, that if we could, the question here was, how could we use the opportunity to fix these things to build trust? And so we started thinking about, could we in fact use technology to fix these potholes and also to build trust at the same time? That was really the experimental question that we were posing here. And so our work is generally driven by these questions about the city. So questions about how we can go trust, how we can become a more caring local government, is how we think about these things, because the city is always changing. And so we're always trying to interrogate what we know about the city as a driver for trying out new ideas. Next. So so the idea was, could we use smartphones to encourage people to report these things to us, right? So we had been running for many years, or decades, long before my time, a 24-hour hotline. But a few years ago, we were going through a process of upgrading that system, and we wanted essentially to create an app to encourage people to use the phone and the app to automatically capture information about things that need fixing in the built environment and to send that to us, right? So this is the very first version of the app is a little bit dated, but it was originally called Citizens Connect. And what you do is, when you see that horrible pothole that we saw now, or just in the last slide, or graffiti, you snap a photo with your app. It automatically grabs your location on the phone, right? We use the GPS, and you just click send, and it will automatically be sent to the people that fix the item. And our hope, the theory here, our hope was that if we could do a really good job of that interaction with local government, that this would be an opportunity for us to build trust. I'm Canadian, but Americans don't trust government, right? They for lots of good reasons, frankly. I think we at local government, we fare better than state or federal government, but we are always trying to build opportunities to have more trustful relationships with our residents. And so we were hoping that if we could build a really good experience for people using the app on the phone, that would actually help to build trust. That was the theory. That was the question. Is that possible? Next.
Just a quick warning, Nigel, 2 minutes.
As people started using the app all over the city, we got lots of feedback. People, we got a lot of data very quickly, and people, in addition to fixing things, people were having ideas about new features that the app should have, which was we didn't anticipate that, but we saw that as a huge opportunity. And so we started launching a series of experimental versions of the app based on the features that our residents were telling us that they wanted to explore. They wanted, one of the versions there is a text-based version. So you would enter you would text it into us just using SMS. Turned out that was harder than we had anticipated, but it did work. But people, after we built it, people didn't use it for various reasons, which was interesting. We tried using QR codes. Americans do not like to use QR codes, so that failed miserably. We did some very interesting experiments using the accelerometers on the phone to automatically detect when you run over a pothole, because as you're driving and you hit a pothole, you and the car and your phone are shaking, right, as you hit that pothole. And the idea was, could the accelerometers on the phone, which is the circuitry on the phone that could automatically detect oscillations in movement in the phone, could we use that and some artificial intelligence to automatically detect where potholes are? And it turns out we can. I can go into that further if you like. But again, you know, as we started, and then you can see there in the lower left is the final version of the app after all this experimentation. But as I mentioned in the beginning, the intent here was to see whether or not the app could build trust. And so although we were getting a lot of people using the app, we still had to explore specifically, because our sense was just because people are using the app doesn't mean that that's not the same as trust. That's not equivalent, right? That just might mean that obviously it provides utility, but it was unclear. Does this change the way that people feel about local government? Because that's what trust is, right? It's a feeling ultimately. And so next page, we tried to explore this idea. So the way that the app worked was that once you send in that photo of the pothole, automatically our back-end systems get it, and then you get a notification on your phone saying, yep, the city of Boston has it. And once it's fixed, you get a photo of the fix and a note saying, you know, we did it. But we had the idea that what if, in addition to the fixed pothole in this case, we would also send a photo of the team that did the fixing. Because our thought here was, if we could reinforce the idea that your issue, your pothole, was fixed not by robots or you know, but by humans, people with names, you know, Miguel and Steve, that would change the way you thought about the experience, reinforcing this idea that the transaction was one between humans, namely you as the reporter, and humans, namely the people that did the fixing. And so we hoped that dynamic would change the way that people thought about government. And so we decided to study this problem with some research friends of ours at Harvard, looking at does the fact that when you get the photo of the team that did the fixing, does that change the way that you feel, you think and feel about the experience? Next photo. And it turns out that it does. So this is the paper that our researcher friends wrote as a result, due to the results. Next. And this is the results. You know, so whenever we included the photo of the people who did the fixing, for the people that did the submitting, the likelihood, or it increased the total number of things that they would report by I can't see the numbers here. I think it's 30%, which was huge. So it means that you go from just reporting potholes. First, maybe you're just reporting a lot more potholes, but your usage goes up, and that the range of issues that you report also goes up. So you go from reporting just that one type, in this case potholes, to also reporting graffiti and broken streetlights and a whole range of other issues. And that change in behavior lasts for 13 months, which is pretty significant, right? So that's more than a year's worth of behavior change when we do this sort of work. And so, you know, this way of thinking about how technology changes the relationship between our residents and local government, I think is a really fruitful area for further work. And you know, that's something that we're looking into as well. There's a whole set of questions here about what you do with these results and so on. But in general, I think that taking a critical eye to the ways and the impacts of technology on city living is a really interesting way to conceive, to think about the role of technology in cities. Thanks very much.